Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology,
Or at least we will, once Congress gets David Grush in a skiff.
that's right. It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Now, suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens, woof,
Woo. It's a very exciting time.
it is. A quick reminder before we get into it, if you want to support what we do here, the best way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime, or our Discord, which you can find on our website. Scott, hey, what's going on with UFOs this week?
Oh, man. Chuck, we are talking about Congress this week, which I know is our
Okay,
favorite
all right.
topic. We often joke that this is a political podcast that only cares about a single topic,
Yeah,
which is UFOs.
yeah,
We often on this show find ourselves discussing controversial
mm,
politicians such as
yeah.
Nancy Mace, Representative Luna, Representative Burchett, people like this, lately Donald Trump. And
Mm.
I've noticed a growing contingent of comments like, oh, your Trump derangement syndrome is showing. And
Mm.
oh, hey, like I come here for serious commentary and you two idiots are giggling through every minute of it. Take it seriously. Listen, man, if you are here as like a staunch right winger who wants to hear us like
It's probably
falling
not
all
your
over
shit.
and talking about how Trump's going to save the world, if you're here for hard hitting political commentary,
Yeah,
I hate to break it to you, like you're not going to be happy here. This is two
yeah,
idiot friends who giggle through everything because at the end of the day, UFOs are silly. They're fun to
yeah,
talk about. I
yeah,
believe in it. Right? Like at the end of the day, I'm a believer. I believe this shit is out there. I believe there's something to it, and I believe it is worth talking about. I don't believe it is a fraught, weighty topic.
mm,
Like maybe it will be at
yeah,
some
maybe.
point. Right now, the
Yeah,
reason we started talking about this is because there was this shift in 2017 from the UFOs being a goofball topic that always got
right.
the X-Files theme played over it and no one took seriously to, oh, maybe
Oh,
there's
wait, maybe.
something to this,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
there's still a fringe edge to this,
yeah,
right? Like, and depending on where you are, we have loads of followers who are in a very like nuts and bolts camp. They're like, I am
yeah.
prepared to
I would
accept
say
there's
most.
something in the air. It's probably man made. That's fair.
Yeah,
We have followers who are more in my kind of camp who believe there are things in the air that exhibit sufficiently anomalous behavior to make the non-human hypothesis at least something I'm willing to entertain, even if I'm not
mm,
like 100% ready to take it. And we have followers who are mad at us for not dedicating more time to hardcore topics about consciousness and psychic phenomenon, and why haven't we talked about the telepathy tapes, and
mm,
why aren't we
mhm.
talking about the law of one stuff? And I I'm interested in all that stuff too, but like I feel like we have to walk this weird line
Yeah, yeah,
where no matter how we talk about it, somebody's upset at us. So
yeah,
I'm just kind
yeah.
of putting
That's
my
totally
flag in
fair.
the sand, guys. Listen, we're two idiots who giggle about UFOs. And if
Yeah,
you enjoy that, I'm so happy to have you here. At
yeah,
the end of the
yeah, yeah,
day, I'm talking to Chuck.
yeah,
And I hope other people like it. But I won't be mad if that's not what you're looking for. But
yeah,
stop leaving shitty comments.
yeah. Thank you. And I have to say, this is a big disclaimer at the front. That makes me think that today is going to be a little bit fringier. Is that true?
No, it's not going to be fringier,
No,
but we're
okay.
talking about Congress, which
Just
means we're
responding to
talking about, yeah, political stuff more than usual.
cool.
Like when we're talking about, Barber and his psionic
Mm,
assets, it's kind of easy to sidestep, the whole
yeah.
idea of where we fall politically. Not
Yeah.
so much today.
Not as much. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Now that said, let's get into it because yeah, Congress has been doing some wild stuff the
Yeah.
last few weeks.
Yeah.
So
I'm not surprised.
I'm going to rewind us a bit because since
Okay.
Christmas time, we have been going hardcore, absolutely like pedal to the metal, talking about all the new stuff, new whistleblowers and stuff. But Congress has also been working. Um,
Oh yeah.
so back in November, the Trump admin hadn't taken over yet.
Hmm.
And they held the House UAP hearing on November 13th. And I'm going to replay a little section of that for you.
Yeah. Okay.
Representative Nancy Mace is chairing the hearing, and she's talking to Lou Elizondo, who is the former director of the Pentagon UFO program, ATIP, and he's there to testify about what he learned in his time. And she's
Mhm.
asking him questions. She says, "Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?" And Lou said something very interesting. He said, "We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed a document 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals," which
Interesting.
Jared Moskowitz in the back row kind of like perks up immediately. And when he got a chance to talk next, he said, "You specifically said the document said you can't talk about crash retrieval." Well, you can't talk about Fight Club if there's no Fight Club, which
Yeah. It's
great
really
quote,
true.
by the way.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I know a lot of members of Congress were kind of already on board with this topic, but that
Sure.
felt like one of those moments where more people in Congress sat up and paid attention. Why on
Yeah.
earth would Lou have a non disclosure agreement about a
Right.
topic if it wasn't a
If it
topic?
didn't
Like,
exist.
that
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. So,
Right.
we got a lot of quotes from Congress members in the following days and weeks talking about a little bit of renewed energy on the subject of UAPs. And in particular, what they were talking about was they wanted to get a special select subcommittee. So
Yeah. Wait.
Congress
What
is
is?
made up of a Right. So Congress is made up of a ton of committees, right? There's the intelligence committee, there's the oversight committee, all of
Right.
these things, right?
Yeah. The big
They
ones.
all have kind of areas of responsibility. A subcommittee is just that. Like the oversight committee as a whole is interested in all these topics, and a subcommittee will form that is interested in a specific topic in their area of responsibility.
Okay.
Um, so there's been this idea that they want to get a special select subcommittee specifically on the topic of UAPs. And in
What
Congress,
is?
getting a subcommittee lets you get some of the powers of your
Mm,
larger committee, like
okay.
subpoenas and assigned staff and things like that.
Got it. What is a
Um,
select subcommittee, though?
I
Do
think
you
it
know?
just means that there are select members of the larger committee, but I don't know. I'm
Okay.
guessing.
That's all right. Okay. Got it.
So after the hearing, Representative Eric Burleson said, "I want to get a special select subcommittee on it. If I had any say in it, I would try to get them to hire Grush and Elizondo." So you can tell, like, they
Yeah.
had just heard from Elizondo in the hearing. Clearly, David Grush was still echoing large in his mind from the previous hearing. Like, he's like, "I want to hear more from these guys."
Yeah. Why? Okay. So, like, yeah, I agree. But why would they need to hire them in order to hear more from them?
No, that's a great question. We have been hearing about Congress's repeated struggles to get David Grush in a SCIF. A SCIF is
Hmm.
secure compartmented information facility. It's where they can safely talk about classified materials with their witnesses. So often you'll hear these witnesses in the public hearing say, "I can talk about that in a classified setting."
Right.
David Grush in particular was like, "Yeah, I heard X, Y, and Z. All of this stuff is true, and I can't talk about any of it publicly, but get me in a hearing, I'll give you all the details." And they
Right.
weren't able to. Basically, Grush left the government. His security clearance was revoked,
Which,
arguably improperly. And
yeah.
because he doesn't have a security clearance, he is not allowed inside a secure compartmented information facility, even though he's the one who's going to be giving the information, he's
Yeah.
literally not allowed to walk inside of it. So they have to get him temporary access or restore his
Interesting.
security credentials. So one of the things they were talking about was the idea that they could hire him on as
Mhm.
staff in one of the congressional committees, and they have a
And
certain
sponsor
number of
him.
clearances they are allowed to give out. They could sponsor him for clearance, and then they
Right.
could talk to him. What's
Yeah.
confusing
Yeah.
is they also mentioned Elizondo, and as far as I know, Elizondo doesn't need to be hired. He still maintains active clearances. He talks all the time about how he
Yeah.
can't talk about certain things or he'll jeopardize his clearances.
So, like, do you know who Elizondo's? Because you have to be sponsored by a body. You cannot
Mhm.
have clearances, from what I understand,
Mhm.
unless it's sponsored by something in the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Normally, for example, if you're in the military, you're sponsored by the branch of the military you're in. If you're an
Right. Yeah.
intelligence committee, you're doing that.
Yeah.
Last I heard, Lou was working for Space Force, but I
Oh,
don't
okay.
know beyond that. I also know that it is not uncommon for um, members who leave the government to maintain their security clearances while working in the private world, but I don't
Hmm.
know the exact details there. But
Yeah.
to the best of my knowledge, Grush's security clearances were explicitly revoked, which is why they can't get him in a skiff. I don't think
Got it.
that applies to Lou Elizondo. They should be able to get him in
Okay.
a skiff.
Okay. So there's a difference between revocation and elapsing or something. Um,
I think, but
yeah.
again, two idiots.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Perfect.
uh, we also got a quote from Representative Tim Burchett, who said something that I'm using him as the example, but we hear this from a number of the members of the UAP caucus who are mostly hardline Republicans. He said, "We really need a select committee so that we can go out and get this information subpoenaed eventually. But the reality is, none of that is needed if President Trump will come through with disclosure."
Whoa. Wait. Is he saying that they don't need a committee because Trump is going to disclose everything on his own?
Yeah, a
Wow.
lot of these hardline
Yeah.
Republicans, especially, but a lot of people broadly in
Yeah.
the community as well, think that Trump is going to be the disclosure president. Um, the thing about Trump is he's a wild card. Like,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
could do anything. The question is, does it suit him? And
Yeah.
he did come in saying two things that were really notable. One, he said he was going to disclose all of the JFK files. If you don't know, there are many, many still classified JFK documents. They were supposed to have all been declassified years ago, but basically every year they come up for declassification, and every year the sitting president has reauthorized some portion of the files to remain classified.
Interesting.
What is in those files? It's hard to say. The
Yeah.
it's the obvious read is there something damaging or embarrassing, or the president wouldn't keep reclassifying them. But
Right.
we don't actually know. It could turn out to be nothing, or it's like some unrelated secret that happened to be in there about like CIA methods that has nothing
Mm,
to do with JFK's murder. But because we don't know, people get really
yeah.
excited about it. So Trump was like, I'm going to declassify all the JFK files. All right,
Right.
fair.
Well,
The other
I
thing
mean,
he said is, you're going to know what's going on with the New Jersey drones on day one.
yeah,
So they're
I
not
do.
getting this from nowhere. This idea that Trump is going to be the disclosure president.
Yeah.
But Trump himself hasn't said that. It's just that he's done a few things that kind of lead you to believe, okay, he's broadly aligned with this. Or people like Tim Burchett think they can kind of push him in that direction.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But on the other hand, he also said he was going to declassify all the UFO stuff in his first presidency. Right.
I don't know if he actually said that or if people just believed it, but yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fair. Okay. So how is that working out so far?
Yeah. Mixed bag. He did
Okay.
sign the executive order saying that all the JFK files should be declassified. And to his credit, I guess, the FBI immediately found 2,400 files that, oops, I guess we lost them.
Huh.
Did Was this actually a coincidence? Is there some hardline Trump supporter in the FBI who was like, finally, I've got clearance to go into the locked closet and find this stuff? Who knows?
Yeah.
But they did apparently find them, and the word is they're working on declassifying. We'll see what
Oh,
comes of that. Um,
okay.
Regarding the drones, it took 2 weeks, so people were a little upset. Like he said, day one.
Yeah.
But what actually happened was his press secretary came out and gave this very weird statement saying all of the drones in New Jersey were actually authorized by the FAA, which is a wild thing to say. I'm not saying it's a lie. I don't know that. I don't work in the
Yeah.
government, but it does contradict everything we heard from every single authority figure for a month straight,
Yeah.
including the head of the DoD and the FAA. Like, they all said they don't know what it is, they're unauthorized, and they're shutting down airspaces to stop it. So
Yeah.
it's a little wild to say, oh, they were all authorized, like,
Yeah.
experimental flights.
Yeah. I mean, is this surprising from a press secretary? Really? Like, I don't know.
It was
Yeah.
certainly disappointing to anyone who was hoping that Trump was going to come out and go, "Hey guys, turns out it was Russia, or it turns out it was ours, or it turns out it was
Right.
aliens." Like he was
Yeah.
just like, "Nope, we knew about them."
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like the kind of response from someone who legitimately doesn't know what they are.
Mhm.
Um, would kind of make up a story about how we do know
Yeah.
what they are. They're totally legit. Don't worry about it. So
It's also interesting that Trump himself did not issue that statement. Like
yeah,
we
right.
know he is comfortable making statements directly. He loves
Yeah,
doing that. This
yeah. Didn't
one,
tweet
the
about it
press
or anything.
secretary got to give very little ceremony around it. It just kind of happened one day, and they,
Hmm.
no further questions. So
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe
yeah,
Trump will be the disclosure president. Like I said, he's a wild card, and I mean
yeah.
that in the like Charlie Day, Always Sunny in Philadelphia sense of like cutting the brakes
Mhm.
on the van and throwing himself out the back door. Like, who knows what this guy's
Who
going to
knows
do?
what'll happen? Yeah,
The things he's going to do might happen to be aligned with what we want. I don't know. I'm
yeah,
not ruling it out, but I don't pin my hopes on what Trump's going to do because
yeah.
the dude's a wild
Nobody
card.
knows. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Out
Uh,
of curiosity, I know this isn't the topic for today, but are the New
mhm.
Jersey drones still a thing?
They absolutely are still a thing. They
That's so
do seem
crazy.
to have slowed,
Okay.
but they do not appear to have stopped. I, I have debated about how much follow up to do on the drones.
Yeah.
I've been sitting on some of this information for a while, including like the president's statement that they were all authorized.
Right.
Certainly, all the people in New Jersey were like, "This is bullshit." This is absolutely untrue.
Yeah.
Cory Booker, recently a senator, said that's obviously not true, and I've been assured that by the FAA. There are also sightings happening elsewhere, including I think like Wisconsin now. So,
Wow.
but it is a frustrating story to cover because nothing has happened
Yeah.
that gives it a sense of closure. We haven't found out it's
Yeah.
Russia. We haven't found out it's ours. We haven't found out it's aliens. It hasn't stopped, but it also hasn't like escalated. Nothing
Mhm.
dramatic has happened. It's just kind of there. I don't know, man. It's a very weird story.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So back on the topic of a
Yeah.
select committee. So Burchett and a number of others were like, yeah, we want a select committee, but also Trump's going to do it. Representative Jared Moskowitz, who is, I believe, the only Democratic member of the UAP caucus, said, I want the speaker to do a select committee in the next Congress because Congress has an oversight function. We cannot just give all the power to the executive. This is our function of oversight.
Yeah. I mean, it makes what I'd expect from Congress. This is totally an oversight thing. It is. like the military overseeing itself, um,
Yeah.
is, you know, I get it. Like people want to believe that they're accountable and stuff like that, but the thing is, Moskowitz wanting a thing doesn't really do much, right? Like,
No,
um,
for sure.
yeah.
But intriguingly, around the same time, we got a statement from the House Oversight Committee chair, James Comer, who
Right.
said a select committee is something that is being discussed.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's actually really interesting. I, I think part of it is I sort of discount most of the things the UAP caucus says they want.
That's
But
fair. Yeah.
but hearing Comer talk about it gives it a little credence that maybe it'll happen. Um,
Yeah, it pulls a little more weight than just Burchett doing his usual shooting off about how everyone's compromised and
yeah,
it's a cover up. Even if I happen to also believe there's a cover up, you know. um,
yeah.
However, unfortunately, in mid January, Representative Burleson said there was talk of there being a select UAP committee, and apparently the Speaker's office turned that idea down. I've heard they may allow a task force, which is basically a neutered committee. It's better than nothing, but it wouldn't have dedicated staff or subpoena power. You've got to have the right staff to investigate this, and then the committee needs to have the authority so that when we subpoena someone or go into a skiff, we have a need to know.
Yeah, that's that is interesting. So they're being kind of like, is it being downgraded or like
Yeah,
is a
I
task
think
force
that's fair.
less than a committee?
We're going to talk about this a lot, but in a
Okay, all right.
nutshell, yes. A
Okay.
subcommittee appears to be a bridge too far for the speaker, who is
Mm,
not prepared
okay.
to give them subpoena power to chase down UFO leads. I don't know
Yeah.
how the speaker feels about the UFO
Yeah.
topic, but that appears to be a line that they're not willing to cross. A task
Okay.
force is kind of a way to throw them a bone without
Right.
giving them all the like power that comes with a full subcommittee.
Okay. I just looked something up. A select subcommittee or a select committee is something that's formed for a temporary like purpose.
That
Go
makes
do
sense.
this thing, as opposed to a standing committee, which continues being a thing forever
That makes
until
sense.
it's
Yeah.
disbanded. So yeah. Um, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
so where are we at
the
now?
yeah, the interesting thing is that since Trump stepped back into the White House,
Yeah.
there's been a load of pressure on him on the UAP topic in general. So, on the
Okay.
one hand, we've got Congress saying we really need a UAP select
Hmm.
subcommittee, right? They heard from David Grush, they heard from Lou Elizondo, and they're like,
Yeah. Right.
we are clearly being lied to, and there's clearly something here. We've got to make this happen. But they're struggling to get their ducks in a row. I didn't mean to make that joke,
Yeah.
but there it is. We got the ducks in.
Yep. I didn't even catch it.
Meanwhile, Trump shows up and he has not explicitly said anything about UFOs, but everybody seems to kind of feel that he can be nudged in that direction. So we start hearing a lot of stories
Hmm.
about people making statements and writing articles and meeting with Trump and going on his kids' podcast and doing things that are like, hey, we should be looking into this UFO thing in the hopes that it kind of nudges him. Um,
Right.
I've got a few examples here that I want to talk about. The
Okay.
first and funniest is um, when Trump took office, he put up an announcement that he was going to declassify all the JFK files.
Hmm.
And Chuck Schumer responded to him on Twitter with a 3-word tweet that just said, now do UFOs.
That's awesome. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Chuck's
Representative
straight to the point.
That's right. Representative Mace said, finally, something we agree on. Representative Luna
Yeah.
said, I agree. Representative Burleson said, I have been reaching out to Trump's campaign and to his policy team, trying to get them to consider UFO disclosure as well, do an executive order on that. I think it's the only thing Chuck Schumer and I can agree on that the American people and really the world deserves to know this.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it does make me a little sad that they feel like that's the only remaining bipartisan topic, but Yeah, I
Yeah.
think because I think there are
Yeah,
more.
it would be real
But
weird if UFOs were the things that healed Congress.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So who else was pushing Trump on it? You said there was a whole raft of
Yeah, there are
nudging.
a load of people, but there's two more that I want to talk about who you'll be happy about.
Okay.
First of all, Big Daddy Lou Elizondo,
Eh,
former head of ATIP,
Okay.
drafted a policy brief for the incoming administration. He said, quote, recent events like the drone incursions in New Jersey and the Chinese spy balloon incidents underscore a critical gap. The U.S. woefully lacks a whole of government solution to emerging all domain technologies. To solve this problem, this policy brief recommends that the president empower a White House senior advisor, or czar, within the National Security Council to one, coordinate the U.S. government's response, two, formulate policy, and three, conduct domestic and international outreach. A czar for EADT, Emerging All Domains Technology, will allow the president and other key decision makers to get the answers they need when they need them.
Yeah. Sorry. Brief aside. I don't know how we ended up with czar as a title. Like, how did we
So
pick
weird, right?
an
Yeah,
ancient Russian emperor's title as
very strange.
as a body? Anyways, so
How
did
about
he?
a UFO Hefe? UFO Shogun.
Yeah, FA has kind of
UFO
the same
Pope.
problems, doesn't it? UFO Pope. Yeah,
Hey,
there you go. Yeah, I like
I
that
like
one.
that. Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm gonna be thinking about this all day now. So did Big Daddy Lou have any suggestions about who should be this senior advisor, like David Grush or I don't know.
Well, naturally, he suggested himself, Chuck.
I mean, I guess that's a way too. But
Okay,
if we want to get
I
Grush
want to.
employed in a security clearance, that would do it too.
Yeah, for sure. I think Grush is probably a better choice. But of course, Lou
Yeah,
is a player. He's been in the
yeah,
halls of power. He believes that he's well positioned to do this. I don't fault him for that. There are a
yeah.
lot
Me
of
either.
people who think that Lou is a grifter and they're going to view this very negatively. I will say this, I was actually unable to find the quote where Lou said he should do the job. But I
Really?
found a podcast where someone asked Burchett what he thought about Lou saying he should do the job,
Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
which was super frustrating for me. I like having primary sources. If you ever look at
Yeah.
our show notes, I've always got a ton of links down
Yeah.
there to the source of any quote I give. In
It's
this case, I
exhausting.
couldn't find it. Sorry, Lou. Let me know if you know where you said this. But they did ask Burchett what he thought about Lou in this role. And Burchett was very excited about it and said he would
Yeah, of
mention it
course.
to Trump. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Good. Good.
The other person we heard from that I want to talk about was Chris Mellon, whose title I
Hmm.
forgot to write down, and it's the longest, most complicated title. He's a
It really is.
deputy director of. I'm not even going to
I don't know.
pretend that I remember. He was a very senior government advisor in previous administrations. Um, He's a very straight shooter. We have a lot of respect for Chris Mellon on this
Yeah.
program. He provided a list of suggestions for Congress and the incoming administration. He said, quote, here I will describe the problem and provide pragmatic options for enhancing congressional oversight, strengthening public trust, and advancing our understanding of these phenomena.
Oh, Melon. I love it. So, what did he come up with?
Yeah, so he's got a few things in here. First of all, he shows that the Air Force refuses to provide information on attempted UAP intercepts with Aero or Congress
Interesting.
and recommends that they, quote, request a detailed report on attempted fighter intercepts of UAP.
Like, so it feels like a new thing, but also doesn't. Um, are is the Air Force scrambling jets to go like peek at UFOs? Like, I knew the UFOs were
Mhm.
interacting, but okay,
That is
interesting.
exactly what he's saying. And he does provide
Okay.
a few examples. Interestingly, one of the reasons he says that you know this is happening is there are many incidents where both Navy jets and Air Force jets were scrambled to intercept a UAP. and only the Navy pilots reported it through the proper channels. So we
Interesting. Okay.
definitely have seen a historical reluctance on the part of the
Yeah.
Air Force to talk
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
this at all. They have always been reluctant to coordinate with Arrow. That appears to be ongoing.
Okay.
So, he's like, hey, Congress, you should maybe demand that they
Yeah.
do what they're supposed to do, which is if
Yeah.
they do anything related to UAP, they're supposed to tell Arrow about it. And then
Yeah.
Arrow has an obligation to tell Congress.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's yeah, that makes sense. So the detailed report is not really like it's not actually like goal. It's like
Right.
if you're gonna write this report, you're gonna have to do your homework, and then
Hmm.
it's gonna be obvious that you didn't do your homework. And so
Exactly.
uh
Yeah. Just get them playing ball. Yeah.
mhm.
On a related note, he shows that aerospace monitoring systems are failing to report UAP incursions and recommends
Mm,
that Congress request a report of all surveillance systems and how many UAP reports each has submitted. And he
okay.
seems to be kind of implying that by getting this information, it will become obvious which ones are failing to submit any because they
I
should
see.
all be seeing some.
Right. So this is like all the branches and trying to do a report on like how many of your radar stations are detecting this thing. And oh, hey,
Yeah,
look at this. Air Force has submitted a 0 byte file.
exactly. Now, he's a little less clear here, and he seems to
Yeah,
be a little more willing in this section to chalk this up to administrative problems.
sure.
He kind of suggests that requesting the report would help to communicate to all of these surveillance systems that they have an obligation to report to Arrow.
Sure.
I don't think any of them are unaware of this, but it's one of those things like if you don't ask for it, someone could reasonably plead ignorance. So by
Yeah.
making it very clear you expect this information, you
Hmm.
reiterate what the proper channels are. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You're going to like this one. He
Yeah.
mentions that Arrow's report showed that signals have been detected from UAPs in the 1 to 3 gigahertz and 8 to 12 gigahertz frequency ranges, and he recommends Congress should direct the NSA to investigate these signals.
That is a super specific detail. I don't think we talked, maybe we did talk about that,
We
but I
kind
have
of
a ton of
glossed past it.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
What was the signal? Were you able
Yeah.
to decode it? Like, is it
Yeah.
communication? Was it radar? Like, what is
Is
happening
it just
here?
noise? Like, yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Mellon asks all the same questions. Like, basically, the only information we have is a signal was detected from a UAP in these frequency ranges. So what Mellon says is very straightforward. Look, the NSA has the best signals analysis department.
Yeah.
They should be digging into this.
Yeah. I mean, I know that it's probably NSA is probably the organization we generally hear the least about what they're actually working on.
No
But
such
does he?
agency.
Yeah, exactly. Does he have some evidence that they aren't working on it? Or
He's unclear, but again, what he's kind of stating here is making a formal request from Congress helps set expectations that they should be looking and telling Congress about it. Maybe they're
right?
already looking, but they're only telling the CIA about it or the Air
Sure.
Force or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And lastly, he discusses the many flaws in Arrow's historical UAP report and recommends that Congress request a better one.
That's awesome. So if I remember, he wrote a report that was like at least as long as the Arrow report that just had the things that were wrong about the Arrow report. Is that okay?
Yeah, it was scathing.
Yeah.
And, unsurprisingly, he's pretty bluntly dismissive of
Oh,
Arrow's attempts to whitewash the history of UAP investigations and
yeah.
says Congress should demand better.
Yeah. They should.
Mellon kind of concludes his thing by saying, it is disappointing, but not surprising, to find
Mhm.
strong indications of non compliance with the congressional mandate requiring all UAP information be promptly shared with Arrow. These urgent and vital national security issues require Congress to remain vigilant and insist on compliance.
Yeah. I think that's great. I like that he's got this like through line on all of those suggestions that Congress can't really expect any organizations like the Air Force to just volunteer everything. They need to
Mhm.
actually like do that oversight role, demand information. So they're entitled to it, but if nobody's, if the wheel isn't squeaking, nobody's gonna.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. If you're not demanding it, it's not just going to show up on your lap. Like you might
Right.
get lucky, and some people are proactive, but you need to
Yeah.
be actively pushing for this. Um,
Yeah.
and we're going to talk later on about an interesting tension
Yeah.
regarding whether Congress has a need to know
Yeah.
and why certain agencies may feel entitled to keep info from Congress. But yeah, broadly speaking, Congress is supposed to do oversight. You can't do oversight without info. And at the bare
Yeah.
minimum, Congress should be asking for the info they need.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Um, so yeah, Trump after the UAP hearing, we had Congress increasingly clamoring for a UAP select hearing committee. Um, After Trump took office, we had a lot of people trying to exert pressure on him to dig into the UAP topic and take it seriously. And on February 3rd, Representative Anna Paulina Luna tweeted, "I have an announcement next week that will impact the entire nation."
Yes. Well, I mean, it's Luna, so it's probably up and was right.
That's what everybody assumed.
Yeah.
Although the idea that it would impact the nation and not the
Oh,
world
yeah.
had a few people like, it's not UFOs, you guys settle down.
Yeah.
Um, Thankfully, we didn't have to wait too long. On
Yeah.
February 10th, the House Oversight Committee put out a press release saying Chairman Comer and Representative Luna will hold a press conference on February 11th to announce the creation of a new Oversight Committee task force of national interest.
Okay. Well, so just like Burleson predicted, it's a task force rather than a committee. But it doesn't say anything about UFOs or what it's doing, even.
Yeah, they were still being kind of cagey about it.
Yeah.
Lester Nair, the UAP caucus founder, floated a few possibilities. He said, one, this might be a UAP focused task force, just like they've been
Mhm.
talking about the whole time. But as a task force, it would have certain limitations placed on it that,
Sure.
don't make it quite as appealing as a full subcommittee. Um, Two, this could be a broader declassification task force, which would target UFOs along with other things that Trump has expressed interest in, like the JFK files. Or third, this could be a Pentagon audit task force. The Pentagon
Oh.
has apparently failed its audit
Mhm.
every year for a long time, which Tim
Mhm.
Burchett is very fond of pointing out and implies that they are failing because they cannot disclose all of the illegally hidden black UFO programs.
Yeah. Um, oh, I would be really interested in the audit task force. But from what I recall, the difference um, between what they audit and what they spend is so large. I find it
It's
a little
wild.
hard to
Yeah.
believe it's all black programs. But I mean, it seems like the Pentagon generally just doesn't really care to be overseen. Feels like they're
Yeah.
doing just fine on their own. Thank you very much.
If I had to guess, it was a confluence of factors. There
Yeah.
probably are very
Oh, yeah.
expensive, illegally hidden black UFO programs. We have heard repeatedly that the
Sure.
problem with these black programs is you have to spend as much on security as you do on whatever the program is actually doing. So it does get
Yeah.
very expensive. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if there were non UFO equally illegally hidden black programs, right? Who knows what
Mm,
they're doing, but UFOs probably ain't the only thing.
right.
And B, Congress just hands the military trillions of dollars every year without batting an eye. There doesn't seem to be a lot of pressure on them to meet this audit. I imagine they're like, yeah, we'll get into it. We'll take a look. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, we need more money.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's going to be a lot of different things, but
Yeah. So Matthew Pines, director of intelligence at Sentinel-1, who we've quoted a number of times, said this task force is likely UAP related, but it's going to be an informal ad hoc body with no legislative or subpoena authority unless granted by the full committee. It may conduct investigations, gather evidence, write reports, but its influence will depend entirely on the chairman's discretion.
Oh, no, that's interesting. Um, so so they're like borrowing power from the chairman.
Yeah, I
In
mean,
essence.
basically, if your task force doesn't have subpoena power, the only way you can subpoena someone is to ask your supervising committee to subpoena them for you. So, what he's getting at here is a task force is really only as powerful as the chairman that's supporting it. So, Chairman
Mhm.
Comer, in this case of the oversight committee, if he's got their back, it could be good, or this could be a way to handicap it where Chairman Comer's like not that
Right.
interested and he's just throwing Luna a bone to get her to leave him alone.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I'm not in love with everyone going out of their way to temper expectations before we even know what it is. But carry
Yeah,
on.
for sure. Christopher Sharp, the editor of Liberation Times, said, quote, from my understanding, a congressional task force is something which investigates an issue and then delivers a report with recommendations.
Mm. Okay. So like they might dig into the UFO topic. Maybe they're able to get Grouch in a skiff and then give the actual oversight committee a report recommending that they kick in the doors at Area 51 or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I would bet the conclusion of that report is already written. Burchett and Luna are down there feverishly scribbling out what they think should happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
that seems to be what they're saying is there'll
Yeah.
be an
Okay.
investigation and then they will make recommendations to the broader committee.
Okay.
Um, Lester Nair once again chimed in and said, yeah, the distinction between a task force and a subcommittee is meaningful. A task force is weaker than a subcommittee and has no formal authority under House rules. Unlike a select committee, it lacks independent subpoena power, it lacks dedicated staff, and it lacks the ability to conduct official investigations. It functions as an advisory or investigative working group, but it has no real enforcement mechanisms.
Okay. Yeah. So they keep mentioning subpoena power. Why is that such a big deal? Is it just so they can drag hostile witnesses in and force them to testify? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. You've got it in a nutshell. Like with subpoena power, we assume there are hostile witnesses out there, right?
Yeah.
Like say
The entirety
the
of the Air Force.
security director of Lockheed Martin who is illegally hiding a UFO from the government. Like
Yeah.
that guy's probably not super motivated to come testify. If you have subpoena power, you can demand that he testify, and if he
All right.
fails to testify, you can apply legal consequences.
Okay.
But Lester Nair added to that. He said there's a little more to it. The value of a subpoena isn't just about forcing hostile witnesses to comply, it's also about giving sympathetic insiders a controlled legal channel to provide information without fear of retaliation. It's less about coercion, per se, and more about protection.
Oh, okay. So like you if you're bound by like your bosses say no, you can't say this, but then
Mm-hmm.
Congress uh serves you papers or however they do
Mm-hmm.
this, then you're like, well, sorry, my hands are tied.
Yeah.
I have to go tell that
Sorry,
one guy.
boss. I ain't going to prison
Yeah.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Yeah. So after a solid 24 hours of the UFO
Mhm.
community theorizing about what we were going to get, Comer and Luna finally held their press conference announcing the task force on the declassification of federal secrets.
Okay.
Representative Luna said, quote, the federal government has been hiding information from Americans for decades. We have spent years seeking information on the assassinations of President Kennedy, Senator Kennedy, Reverend King, and other government secrets without success. It is time to give Americans the answers they deserve. which is why I am honored to lead this bipartisan task force that seeks truth and transparency. We will also investigate UAPs, USOs, the Epstein client list, COVID 19 origins, and the 9/11 files. We will work alongside President Trump and his cabinet members to deliver truth to the American people. From this moment forward, we will restore trust through transparency.
Let's like I was prepared for JFK and UFOs because we talked about that,
Uh-huh.
but where are those others coming from? Like,
Yeah.
is this QAnon shit? Like, what's happening here?
I mean, yeah, we've talked a little bit about like how coming to the conclusion that the government is lying to you about topic A means it is very easy to come to the conclusion that they're lying to you about everything. I
Yeah.
don't know if this is QAnon shit specifically, but certainly that is a grab bag of right wing conspiracy theories that the deep state is lying to us about
Hmm.
how COVID was made and why vaccines are happening and who was on Epstein's client list. And yeah, now we know for a fact there are still classified documents about JFK that haven't been released. That's not up for debate.
Okay.
And I hope if you've been listening to our podcast for a while, you share my belief that the government has at best been concealing information about UFOs. I
Improperly.
guess we'll see about these others.
I mean, the thing about her statement that bugs me is like the government has been hiding information from her. Yes, that's the entire point of um, clearances. Like, of course, the government has. There's certain things that we don't want out. It's the
Yeah,
improper hiding of information
yeah.
that should be public. Uh,
I
and
agree. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a key word. And to their credit, most of these people, when you interview them, are quick to say, we don't want them to declassify everything ad hoc. Some things should be classified. Weapons research, for example. But the with regards to UFOs at least, the
mm,
broader point is if there's life in the universe, that shouldn't be classified. If there are things flying in our sky, that shouldn't be classified. The fact that the government has reverse engineered something from it, maybe that's classified, but like the existence of these things shouldn't be classified. So I'm in a weird spot here because I broadly agree with the idea that overclassification is a real problem, especially with regards
yeah,
to our pet topic, UFOs. Arguably, when it comes to JFK, I don't know how I feel about trutherism in 9/11 stuff. Like, oh
yeah,
god, like are we going to get a jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams report from Luna? Like I don't want to go that direction.
yeah. Um, I yeah, I guess we'll see.
So yeah, I don't think we're alone in feeling that little
Yeah,
moment of shock. I think a lot of
yeah,
hardline right wingers this played right into their hands. They're like,
sure.
"Yes, awesome. It's finally
Finally.
happening."
Yeah,
I think some of the more left-leaning supporters of the cause like us are like, "Ooh, well, I guess we'll see." Um
all right.
but yeah, let's keep talking about the task force.
Yep.
So, continuing from the Oversight Committee's press release, they said this task force is authorized for 6 months pursuant to committee rules. Members of the task force will be announced at a later date.
6 months seems like an awfully short amount of time.
Yeah, you're not alone in feeling that. Andy McGrillen of that UAP podcast said 6 months doesn't seem like a lot of time to blow the lid off some of the biggest secrets of the last century. Um, Representative Luna seems to have gotten this question at some point and was quoted as saying, a task force is typically set for 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, still seems short.
Yeah. I'm guessing that this is a normal thing and they can get
Mm,
extended if they find stuff. But yeah, I agree. It does seem like, hey, you guys, we're finally going to get to the bottom of JFK, UFOs, and all this other shit. And
yeah.
clock's ticking,
Yeah, right? They better be on it.
right?
Like it said they're going to announce members later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, feel like It's already too late. Like, let's get it done. Like, who's on it?
Yeah.
We know yet?
I don't know yet for sure.
Okay.
But speaking about getting on it,
Mhm.
the press release continued and said today, meaning the same day they announced it, Chairman Comer and Representative Luna sent 11 letters to initiate the task
Oh,
force's effort to declassify information of national interest.
oh, okay. Who'd they send the letters to?
Yeah, this is a wild collection. Uh,
Yeah.
so they sent they have four topics that they sent out, or five topics that they sent out letters on, to different agencies. So they sent the same letter to different agencies. So the Department of Energy, the State Department, and the CIA received letters asking about the origins of COVID-19. The CIA and the NSA received letters asking for documents related to JFK, RFK, and MLK assassinations. The
Okay.
DoD, the State Department, and the CIA got letters requesting information on UFO documents. The DoD and the CIA got letters for information about 9/11, and the Justice Department got a letter for documentation on the Epstein investigation. All of these letters were the same form letter with just the to address and the topic swapped out.
Okay.
In a nutshell, they all said, we request a briefing regarding what documents are in your possession regarding topic. After the briefing, the committee and task force shall seek to review these documents and make recommendations on declassification.
Hmm. Okay. I, I'm glad that they're like sending this out within a week. Um,
Mhm.
how how long does it say that the departments have to respond?
Yeah, Representative Luna said all agencies we have contacted have until the 18th to respond.
Oh,
Yeah, 1 week.
yes. Nice.
If we are blocked from those documents and see that they are stonewalling the president's executive order, which, by the way, is a stretch. The president's executive order was about JFK. She added a whole lot of other shit on there,
Yeah, I
but
know, right?
fine. If we see that they are stonewalling the president's executive order, I am going to start sharing names with y'all. We have not seen a plan for release yet.
What is what names is she gonna share? Like the director of the agency?
Right?
It's like we know that.
It's such a weird, like, I think they're just used to making threats. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if you don't start talking, we're gonna start naming names. Naming who? You just
Yeah.
told us who you're talking to. We already know you're talking to the
Yeah.
CIA, and then like, yeah, it's very strange.
Huh.
To her defense, a little later, she said something a little more sensical about this. She said, if we find that the president's executive order is stonewalled, I don't put it past Chairman Comer or Speaker Johnson to hold those people in inherent contempt.
Okay. Well, all right. I guess that makes a little more sense. But holding them in contempt sort of implies that these letters are subpoenas, but we know that they don't have that power.
Correct. Chairman Comer said, quote, the task force does not have subpoena power, but I do.
Oh,
The task force is going to be a subsidiary of the full oversight committee. So if we have to issue a subpoena, Chairman Luna and I will discuss it and take appropriate action.
got it. Okay. So the task force itself doesn't have that power, but the oversight committee
Mhm,
does, and Comer has their
mhm.
back.
That's
I
exactly it.
I kind of like it this way.
Mhm,
Like feels like legal actions should require a, well-grounded second pair of eyes. And
mhm.
if the UAP caucus is the majority of the task force, I'm not sure they have that at hand. The well-grounded
Yeah,
second pair of eyes.
no, totally. And there's something to be said for this idea of um, clearly asking for a select committee made the
Yeah.
speaker nervous.
Yeah.
But the only reason they needed a select committee was because they think people will say no. So
Hmm.
what they're now able to do is go, you can say no, but I'm going to run it up the chain of command. And Comer is here with me saying he's got my back. So
Yeah.
there's kind of an implicit threat of a follow up subpoena if you don't answer the technically non enforceable polite letter
Yeah.
requesting information.
Yeah. In some ways, this I think might actually be more effective because
Mhm.
uh because a select committee is such a temporary thing, but Comer is a long-standing powerhouse,
Mhm.
and um, yeah, it feels like it might actually land better. Um,
Yeah,
okay,
we'll see. I agree that it sounds promising. All the fears that people mentioned earlier regarding
yeah,
subpoena power are kind of based on the idea that if you don't get a subcommittee, it kind of implies that the chair of your committee or the speaker don't support you. But
mhm,
if you explicitly and overtly have their support and they're coming out and saying, I've got their back and
yeah,
I'm willing to give them more power, that kind of implies that, hey, we're just working around the formal structures of how Congress works, but the power is here and we have it if needed.
yeah. Okay. So there were a bunch of other things that someone mentioned that a task force doesn't have, like
Mhm.
assigned staff. Um, is it just Luna or
Yeah, we know that there will be other people on it. She mentions it's going to be bipartisan. I assume that means probably the UAP caucus. So Luna,
Moskowitz?
Burchett, Moskowitz, but I don't know. They technically
Yeah.
haven't announced it yet. But interestingly, regarding the idea of staff, somebody asked Representative Luna, and she said, we have a staff. We have multiple
Yeah.
attorneys working, and actually, the entire oversight staff is at our disposal to work with us.
Oh, interesting. Um, so if it's just taking time away from existing oversight staff and their
Yeah.
existing work, um, I wonder
Yeah,
I wonder how
it's
much they
unclear,
can get out
right?
of that, you know?
How many attorneys do they have working for them? Is it like we have 2 attorneys, but we can call on the larger staff? Because
Right.
presumably the full-time staffers of the oversight committee have their normal responsibilities and don't really want to be suddenly called in to deal with the UFO issues. But
Right.
who knows?
Yeah.
Again, just 2 idiots. I don't know how Congress works. Maybe that's totally normal.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So enough minutia. Get to the good stuff. What did she say about UFOs?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we do have a little bit of information about UFOs. Um, Representative Luna says we are hoping to present UAP information and at least acknowledge from a government perspective that we are not alone.
Wow, that is a strong start. Like, that's
Mhm.
kind of everything I wanted. And
I mean,
yeah,
it would be a pretty powerful statement if this was like
yeah,
an official congressional acknowledgement that there is non-human life.
hmm,
That's a big deal. We'll
great,
see.
great, exciting time.
Yeah. She also said, I am hoping to set up a congressional delegation to a friendly country that has a program for disclosure that's already been set up, which, to my knowledge, does exist.
Hmm, okay. Any idea what country that is?
Well, friendly country probably rules out Russia or China, who are the two
Yeah.
that we usually hear about also having UFO investigations. My best guess is Japan, France, or Canada. Japan has been running their own congressional UFO hearings. France years ago released a very useful UFO report called the Cometa Report, which Leslie Kane has
Mm.
talked about a lot. And Canada just recently put out their first UFO report, kind of like the ones that Arrow puts out.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we know that those 3 countries are all aware of and at least looking into the topic.
Okay, cool. What about UFO hearings? Any more of those coming?
Yeah. Representative Luna said the next UAP hearing is probably going to be after JFK, but we're definitely
Yeah.
going to have 2. We're going to have
Hey.
one specifically on UAP and USOs. And I'm not just trying to have another hearing and bring in people. I want evidence. And so that's what we're pushing for. And that's why we have the letters that have gone out.
Look, um, that that's awesome. Two hearings is an embarrassment of riches. Like, that's
Right?
great.
We are getting so spoiled compared to like in the
Yeah.
90s. Like, oh my God,
Yeah.
like 2 UAV hearings coming out. This is going to be great.
Yeah. So I'm afraid to ask, but we started this conversation with Grush. Are
Mhm.
they, do you think she's going to target getting him into a skip or?
Yeah, of course. That was one of the first questions people asked. And
Okay.
she said, the last administration denied Grush's security clearance, which is why we couldn't get back into the skiff. Now that we have an actual task force, we can actually do something.
All right. Fingers crossed. Although you mentioned earlier something about Congress maybe not having a need to know.
Yeah, you picked up that dangling thread.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So,
Okay.
at one point, Representative Luna says, all members of Congress have a TS SCI clearance. That's top secret, secure compartmentalized information. The question is, do we get SAP access,
Hmm.
secure access program, I think,
Special
of which
access.
Chairman Comer has been very supportive and will be getting SAP access as well. So what she's
No.
saying is, these legacy programs are SAP programs, which means they operate on a need to know. You may have the right clearances, but if you're not on the list, you don't get to come in the front door. She's saying
Right.
Chairman Comer is going to get them SAP access.
Uh, do you think that he actually has that power?
Well, it's complicated, Chuck.
Yeah.
Also, not to put too fine a point on it, she's wrong about Congress automatically getting TSSCI clearance.
Yeah. I thought so. Like,
um,
I'm sure they get something, but yeah.
They do. They do. She's not wildly wrong, but a
Yeah.
clearance is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
I looked up a document called the Primer on Congressional Staff Clearances that explores
Okay.
this issue directly. And it says, quote, while members of Congress are entitled to access classified information by virtue of the constitutional offices they hold and do not need security clearances, they must rely on their staff to sift through reams of information and brief them on issues. A
Mm.
majority of members of Congress do not have a single staff member with TSSCI clearance, which undermines the support they can provide to their superiors and weakens Congress's ability to legislate or conduct effective oversight.
Got it. So they don't have clearances per se, but they're
Mm-hmm.
assumed to be trusted enough by virtue of
Mm-hmm.
being in Congress. But it
Exactly.
doesn't extend to their staff. And we don't know if
Yeah.
we also don't know if it includes SAP access.
Right. Yeah. So this appears to be the gotcha here, right? The
Yeah.
the Congress people themselves are assumed to have trustworthiness and are allowed access to the things they need based on the committees they're in. That's an important
Mhm.
part. But something that's important, as we've talked about before, is even ignoring the technical detail of whether they literally have a TS SCI clearance or whether they just have the kind of implied one. As we
Right.
know, having a clearance doesn't automatically get you the good shit. It just means you're
Yeah.
eligible to be put on the need to know list.
Right.
The document talked about that also. It said, quote, a TS SCI clearance does not give an individual access to all secure compartmentalized information. That individual must still demonstrate a need to know a particular item or category of information. There is a tension between Congress and the executive branch on the question of who determines need to
Mhm.
know. Congressional rules say that the relevant congressional office makes this determination. But
Of course they do.
according to the executive branch, the determination of need to know is made by the agency where the information originated.
Yep. Yep. 100% makes sense. God, it's like our entire government is based on like loose gentlemen's agreements that I just were never intended to scale. I don't think the founding fathers ever
Yeah.
imagined we would get to this point.
It never occurred to them that someone would be like openly antagonistic to the idea of a government.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. God, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Congress says they get to decide. But DoD disagrees. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Now, in their defense, I think they both have a strong case.
Mm,
The If you are running a severely restricted need to know program. And let's not even talk
Right.
about UFOs. Let's say they're developing
Yeah.
some incredibly powerful bomb or next
Sure.
generation jet or something like that. That
Hmm.
program may take 10, 15 years. Congress may cycle through repeatedly, and you may get wild card members in Congress who may decide to just go public with this
Right.
information. That is a
Yeah.
risk. That's the whole reason you have need to know.
Right.
So I can kind of understand why you might be like, no, you don't actually have a need to know on this topic.
Right.
However, I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah.
Just two idiots.
Just
But
two idiots.
the setup here is pretty clear that what Congress is supposed to provide is oversight over the executive and particularly the military. It's hard to imagine how they can do that effectively if the agency they're supervising gets to decide whether they get to know information. So
Yeah.
I get it. I understand why you would be reluctant, but at the end of the day, you can't have an effective oversight if they don't have information. So I don't know. I think I'm kind of on Congress's side with this, even though Congress is full of wild cards who, yeah, maybe shouldn't have access to every single thing. Broad picture, if Congress is your oversight agency, they need the ability to oversee it. And you
Right.
can't have the body that is supposed to be overseen getting to decide what you get to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if the original intention was that this was a thing that the president mediated or something, but has been since delegated because they can't deal with that. I don't know. Anyways.
I mean, I think broadly speaking, what we're dealing with is there were not state level secrets of
Yeah,
this
that's true.
kind at the founding fathers' time. This is really a World War II thing, right?
Yeah.
Manhattan Project was the first time we really dealt with like literal big hardcore secrets that under no circumstances can be leaked. And I think
Right.
the laws as written just aren't really built to handle it. So when you were joking about there being gentlemen's agreements, it's a little more than that, but at the end of the day it does kind of boil down to, well, yeah, of course
Yeah.
we didn't mean that. Like, well, it's open to interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I always forget that like the whole idea of SCI started in the 40s. Um,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's a
Anyways,
relatively new thing. Yeah.
yeah, what a mess. So how how are folks feeling about the task force overall at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah, yeah. So this is very, very new, obviously. We're
Yeah.
recording this on February 16th. It was announced on February 11th. It has not
Oh,
even been a week. Um,
yeah.
like they haven't even passed the deadline for getting
Right.
their answering the letters that Luna sent out. That said, I think broadly speaking, people feel kind of cautiously optimistic. Like, okay,
Yeah.
there's some weirdness here, but I mean, this is what we're always saying we want, right? We want disclosure. So if this works, I'm kind of in favor of it. I've got a couple of quotes here. Lester Nair pointed out something interesting. He said, strategically, the framing of the UAP issue alongside JFK and MLK assassinations, 9/11, and COVID is a phase change. For all
Mm.
of these, the baseline assumption is not whether they happened, but how. The debate is
Yeah.
about details, not existence. This mirrors how Senator Rounds and Schumer framed the UAP Disclosure Act, explicitly comparing the need for transparency around the JFK assassination files.
Yeah. Um, okay. So like um I see the JFK stuff, although personally I don't really care that much anymore. Maybe I'll feel different once we hear what the files are,
Mhm,
but I'm just not sure that it helps the UFO case to lump it with 9/11 truthers, COVID origin conspiracies, and the Epstein
mhm.
client list. Like this feels weird.
I totally agree. And regarding his larger point, about, hey, nobody disagrees that these other things happen, but there is still a bit of stigma around, like, do UFOs exist? So literally just
Right.
putting it in the same bucket gives it a degree
Yeah.
of, yeah, broader point. I get that. But my fear is that the other stuff will make it easier to dismiss anything they do
Right.
find out about UFOs by lumping it all into the conspiracy bucket. Like,
Yeah.
if the outcome of this is Representative Luna and Burchett hold a press conference saying, you guys, you're never going to believe it. We dug into this, and it turns out the government's been lying to us. And that's it. That's all that happens. I think it will make zero impact because they've
Yeah.
already been saying that for years.
Right.
So something more has to come with it. There has to be some
Yeah.
evidence. If they're actually able to get evidence out as a result of this, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I have my reservations about it being lumped into the same bucket with all the other stuff, though.
Yeah. I feel like they could write this document now and it would have the same amount of effect as it
Mhm.
will 6 months from now. But
Yeah,
maybe
for
I'm
sure.
wrong.
I mean, it all comes down to what they're able to find, if anything. If
Right.
they're able to get some actual evidence out, that'll be a game changer.
We'll see.
Christopher Sharp, the editor of Liberation Times, said something interesting. He said, "This looks like a declassification review board, like what was proposed within the UAP Disclosure Act."
Yeah. It does a little bit. And I remember someone saying like, hey, UAPDA isn't dead. There's always other
Mhm.
ways. I was like, well, yeah, maybe this was another way. So they make their own review board, but I do wish that it wasn't just Luna. Like, we need a
Yeah,
few other
no,
people
it's
out there.
true. Yeah, part of what made the UAP review board in the Disclosure Act compelling was it was a civilian board appointed by the president who were meant to mirror the JFK thing. And you were meant to bring in people with different areas of expertise
Yeah,
who would consider the impact of declassifying information. Right now,
yeah,
the only people considering the impact of declassifying it are Luna and whoever else ends up on this committee, who are maybe a little biased. They happen
right.
to, on this one particular topic, be biased in a way I agree with, but I agree, might be a good idea to have, like you said earlier, a second set of eyes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The last thing I wanted to mention is Lester
Yeah,
Nair again said, importantly, this task force does not create new powers for subpoenas or SCIF access. Members could always request those from Comer. What it does provide is a formalized structure and bureaucratic justification that makes those requests harder to ignore or dismiss.
nice. Okay. Yeah, that's that's awesome. Like, hey, we set up a task force. We all agreed we were going to do this. Um, they have provided results. Now let's do it. So
Yeah.
I
And
think that
I
makes
think it
sense.
kind of boils down to, like, part of our hesitation is Luna and Burchett and all these others have been saying this stuff for years. Like, this isn't new
Yeah.
to hear them saying it.
Yeah.
What's new is them having a structure in place to support them. And he makes a
Right.
good point that they could always request
Yeah, they could have
skiffs
done that
from
forever.
Comer. But now that what they're doing is aligned, at least theoretically, with the president's desires via the executive
Mhm.
order, and Comer is overtly backing it. And as Luna pointed out, a lot of the people Trump is appointing are themselves UFO believers. Marco Rubio, as the new Secretary of State,
Mm.
is an overt supporter of digging into UAP disclosure. So
Mhm.
there does seem to have been a shift in government. And while what they're saying isn't any different, it may be that the wheels are greased enough now. That makes it sound like they're bribing people. There's enough momentum and inertia
Yeah.
behind it now to get over that hump where
Right.
before they were fighting respectability politics and getting other things done. Now
Yeah.
all bets are off, right?
Yeah.
Wild card.
Wild card.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this
Yeah.
is I think that that's a really like optimistic read on it. May not be may not be as good as a select committee on paper, but I think it could be even more powerful. So fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
I am cautiously optimistic. But yeah, who knows what's going to come next? Maybe in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about like, you guys are never going to believe the shit that Luna found. Or maybe we never hear from them again. I genuinely don't know. But
Yeah,
I think one thing we can agree is it's a very exciting time.
it's a very exciting time.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our Discord and social media accounts.
And you can email us at Scott or Chuck at veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.